Thank you again, Clement. So hopefully everybody is seeing my slides now. Yeah, so really we focused in this presentation on exactly that, the implementation process. We had already kind of decided that we were excited about SciNote, but we really, we have a very diverse R&D team, lots of levels of understanding, and so we wanted to really try to capture some of those learnings from the experience of transitioning to SciNote over the past several months. So a little bit about EnviroLogix. Who are we? Essentially, we're a relatively small biotech company, but we are a global leader in the development of rapid mycotoxin and GMO detection technologies. We've serviced the food chain industry for over 25 years with a focus on innovation and customer support. And I really can't stress enough how much the customer vision and the voice of the customer drives our product development and ability to service the industry. We really try to keep a close, intimate relationship with our customer base, and I think that's really important in understanding how to meet the needs of your individual customer, which I'll gladly say that SciNote is excellent at doing as well. So what do we provide? What do we do at EnviroLogix? We focus on offering detection testing solutions across a broad range of customer needs. We provide different products and technologies for mostly for decision point testing all along the food chain. So we have many different customers as well. Their individual needs are varied as well. And we also offer lab services, so internal testing to support higher throughput, and also customers interested in outsourcing or bundling their testing needs. Now, digging in a little bit more to the specifics around actually implementing SciNote, transitioning to that new ELN. First and foremost, you can't have a conversation today without avoid the big white elephant in the room of COVID, right? So we've all learned through 2020 that it's now no longer as simple as getting 12 people in a room and hashing out how we're going to complete a process. It's now, we're all forced to leverage technology. And I think if anything, this is a perfect opportunity to do exactly that. In the wake of 2020, taking hold of things like Teams, Zoom, Google Meets, the ability to communicate through audio and visual methodologies at absolutely lightning fast pace and across different time zones, et cetera, I think is incredibly important. One of the most important things that we ended up doing as a result of these training sessions were to record the training, which was incredibly useful. For instance, there's a number of users who specifically pointed out that those recordings allow them the ability to kind of troubleshoot on their own. So some people tend to learn better by watching somebody complete a process and then going back and trying to do it themselves. So we had a lot of feedback that was a solid approach. And alternatively, there's a really nice key component to recordings that's often just kind of forgotten about. And that's the fact that it captures every critical detail necessary to complete a workflow. So for instance, especially in a digital environment where, the wrong click of a button, the wrong web page, the wrong specific detail impacts so much the ultimate success of completing that workflow. Having a recording where you can watch somebody specifically follow each step and then replicate that on your own, I think is just extremely powerful. The other thing that I wanted to point out, Jonas had just commented that he's created himself as the portal, so the kind of customer support contact right between his team and the SciNote team. I think that is critical. I did comment that SciNote has a fantastic customer support team, but I think also internally within your own organization, make yourself available, become the subject matter expert on the new ELN that you plan to implement, understand it as intimately as you possibly can, and then you have that much more ability to communicate effectively to your team. So as great as SciNote support is, your own internal organization the best. And so it's useful to be a conduit to help navigate that conversation as well. And I also wanted to point out as well, I'll admit this one came from Vid. So we have an R&D team that is greater than 20 people, and right off the bat, he recommended, for larger teams, we like to do multiple sessions. it's a small point, but I can't recommend that enough. Not only did we have users that attended both sessions anyways as a way to reinforce the training, but just scheduling alone became a real challenge for larger teams. So offering multiple training sessions as well as recording them really expanded the impact of the training overall. So moving into, Clement uses this term soft skills or soft abilities. I like to think of our team in a similar way, right? So there are different levels, different responsibilities, there are different personalities even. And so each individual on our team, to me, represents a specific person, not just a blank user that we're trying to get on board, but somebody who we want to get actively engaged and excited about using the new software, the new system. So we have, we are largely an R&D lab. We have peripheral departments to support that structure overall as well. But even within just R&D, we have interns and technicians. They're often focused on completing and executing standard daily work. We have lab scientists that are more tactical and maybe a little more collaborative. We have technical leads who really get more into the project management. And so they're very active in the lab, but also involved in reporting up visual management to senior leadership. And then we have scientific managers who ultimately drive program management and are looking for, the visual dashboards, looking at multiple programs or projects over time, timelines, and then the ability to dive into the data supporting those conclusions and timelines as well. So there's a broad range of visibility, accessibility, and interactability that each of these levels really requires to be successful in their position. Another point I wanted to make here as well. So it's really important, pay attention to the pain points. Jonas mentioned going through the initial demos with not just SciNote, but other ELN, you go through those initial demo sessions. Listen specifically to the pain points from your team. That I can't stress enough how important that is, because you'll never convince people to adopt a process that they walk into with some grudge, right? If there's something preventing them from really wanting to adopt the process, you're fighting an uphill battle at that point. So try to understand specifically what are the pain points that impact efficiency or engagement for your team today, and how will the next implementation, your next ELN, how will they attempt to alleviate that for your team. So finally, moving more into those soft skills. Again, so long time ago, I was very much focused on biopsychology, neuropsychology, ironically enough, Jonas. So to me, behavior drives so very much of what we do. And there really are, at a very broad stroke, generally a couple types of people, right? We have very creative thinkers. We tend to call them right-brained people. We have very logical thinkers that we tend to call left-brained people. And really to enable both types of people to be successful, we want to give creative thinkers, showcase them the value of how you can use this collaboratively. How can you work outside the box in your current workflow while still documenting what you're doing in the lab and feeding that visual management up the chain. Customization is huge for creative thinkers. So often any sort of system that creates too many walls can be a problem. That's one thing I love about SciNote. For instance, inventories. You build the inventory as you want it to be, right? So you can add however many columns you want and layer in your sort of the linkage between those inventories to different tasks. And so it's that kind of customization that really empowers this from an R&D perspective to allow more tactical scientists to utilize the tool to their fullest extent. More logical thinkers are often focused on standardization, right? So daily management, daily standard work, importing an SOP, showing the completion of that SOP, updating the timeline, that sort of thing. And so as much as we don't want to build too many walls to shy away from people who are more creative, there needs to be some level of organization that does create some structure to drive efficiency, because ultimately for those left-brain thinkers, it likely is about efficiency and making sure the task is complete as opposed to driving through this much more colorful landscape. So I really want to stress this a lot. Jonas did a great job focusing on the specifics of how you would choose an ELN. And I think, again, it was a fantastic intro to that process. Once your team is ready to adopt your new ELN, be very intimately aware of each individual user. How can you meet their specific needs? How can you help them be successful? And that should certainly go into, if there are any glaring issues that you could foresee, that should go into your process at the front end, thinking about evaluating your ELNs as well. So finally, this is sort of post-implementation. Once you've gotten people on board, you want to avoid backtrack, right? So you want to avoid sliding down that slope where you've built a nice process, but people are slowly not using it as much as you'd like. There's some of that adoption sort of attrition that occurs. And so to me, the most value driver that can keep people engaged is to just showcase the value, right? So people may come to you with everyday challenges or gripes or complaints about a process that seems inefficient. If you can find a way to improve that efficiency through the use of the ELN, it's incredible how quickly people will get excited about using that tool and go from not wanting to touch it to adamantly use it every single day. It can be really transformative, especially once people fully understand how this is going to impact their workflow on a day-to-day basis. So for us, embedded Office tools, PowerPoint, Excel were huge. From a management, so scientific managers perspective, this is, the difference between being able to look at a project level, evaluate data, not modify, but look at data in a preview and be able to back out, move back and forth between different PowerPoints or Excel docs, I think is huge. That is far more efficient than pulling all those documents down and now opening them individually and looking at them locally. So embedded Office is just a huge seller, massive value to our team, and definitely has been driving its implementation with us. Another one was inventory management. So this is, as a decade plus scientist in general, the inventory management is key. Organization is a massive value add to me. And so this one again is really implemented perfectly in SciNote. It's customizable. It remains flexible enough that our more discovery-focused R&D teams find use out of it. But at the same time, you can standardize it. You can make it very rigid so that, for instance, Jonas mentioned a production team. We don't currently involve, our production team does not use SciNote currently, but if we wanted to merge them into the process, it's built very well to do precisely that, to have more rigor, more standardization, and create different workflows that are more amenable to, say, a production environment than, say, an R&D environment. Also, another huge value add to me, I live and die by my calendar. I probably would have missed my wedding day if it wasn't on a calendar. So the calendar view and the dashboard, the task dashboard are huge. I mean, to have a visual sense of what's happening over the course of the week, over the course of the month, to have indicators showing when those tasks are upcoming or past due, and then to also have that list, that, again, color-coded list of specifically what have I avoided, or maybe not avoided, but missed. Maybe there were a few items last week, small tasks that just fell between the cracks. I'd never happened to pick them up and get to them, but thankfully they're right at the top of my task list. And I know come Monday morning, say that these need to be addressed immediately, very visible, very easy to deal with. And so again, huge efficiency driver. This was less about customization, much more about just driving efficiency. I no longer have to navigate 100 to-do items. I can simply look through the SciNote dashboard and right away know exactly what I need to tackle for the day. So these were some of the largest value adds for us. Thank you very much all for your time. I really appreciate all your time today, not only the panelists and SciNote for giving me the opportunity to speak, but also all the people that have joined the webinar as well. It can be a challenging and daunting task to transition between ELNs. And I would encourage anybody to, as Jonas pointed out, develop that intimacy with your team, understand what they need, their role, their job requirements, their personalities, understand them on an individual basis, and then go back and really survey the landscape of ELNs and understand, use Jonas's tool to understand how can we best leverage what would be most useful for our team, keeping in mind cost, functionality, that sort of thing. So thank you all. I'm happy to follow up with any comments, questions, and yeah, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Your questions. This is a great time now to post them in the Q&A box. It's at the bottom of the screen. We have a couple of questions already, and we'll get to them in a minute. Before I ask you a question, Kyle, I just want to say that I cannot stress or I cannot agree enough with Kyle with what was said. It's so critical to get the buy-in from the whole team. We've seen with customers that were really excited, but then they didn't include the team or some parts of the team, or especially, you know, as soon as you have more than one person, their levels of excitement are going to be different. And some people, you know, just tend to ignore let's say the less excited ones, and then yeah, as Kyle said, it's going to be an uphill battle. So I think this is really important. Jonas already mentioned it, including the team in the decision-making process. This is also critical, showing them already, look how much value we are missing with paper. I think this is really critical. Getting them to the table, hear their voices, and as Kyle said, showing them value. Why is this going to make life better for them? I think it's absolutely critical. I heard once an idea, I believe it was in one of the big pharmaceutical companies, that they struggled with this, and they implemented something they said worked really well. So Kyle, I wanted to ask you if you were thinking about this or even did this. So they they started new roles, like, or, you know, you would be a technician, but also you would be, let's say, software specialist or software manager for a specific software. So this would be then part of your yearly review. You would probably get a raise for this as well. So they really included this also, like, as an opportunity for personal growth, let's say. So what do you think of this idea? Is this something you've tried implementing?
So I think if I understand you correctly, Clement, it seems like an interesting idea. So are you saying this would be something an organization would implement internally to create different user levels within SciNote?
No, to motivate users to, you know, rather than being in opposition, that they would be actively, hold the responsibility with making sure the software is running smoothly and so on.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess I could offer the same sort of similar thing that Jonas had said. So I'm in a current position where I'm sort of the liaison as well, and I do think it's really important to have somebody in that position. We have, you know, a corporate IT department as well as a local IT support specialist, but they're often, to your point, Clement, you want somebody that's very software specific, right? So just having an IT specialist is going to lose the impact of how the data itself matters and what your team needs and all the details around that. I think having somebody who not only understands the organization's team, has a good working relationship with the ELN, or in this case with SciNote, and then ultimately understands the system itself, is really critical. I think you need to have somebody in that role to really best support the needs of your team.
Okay. Jonas, how did your implementation compare to Kyle's?
I think Kyle mentioned a lot of things that we also observed, and it's funny actually, in this slide where you showed the value, you also mentioned the Excel implementation, because one of the more resistant users in our team were totally blown away by using the Excel feature to do a live graph of a growth curve. I can also only stress this, that if you're the expert and which you probably are after you completed this whole selection process, you can actually find value for your team, and you need to do this. It doesn't stop after the selection, and it will not work on its own. And so I think it's a really nice approach Kyle did. I also think it was a great idea with the recordings. We didn't do that. I maybe have to think about this, because I just repeated everything for everyone personally. So that's great.
Okay.
I've maybe, if I may, one question for you, Kyle. So you mentioned that you basically have some creative people that need more freedom, let's say, and some more which need standardized procedures. How much flexibility do you actually give or gave your users in designing or using SciNote? Because there is some flexibility how you can use the different hierarchies and the inventories, right?
Yep. So we mostly addressed it, I shouldn't say cross-functionally, but within the team. So it was discussed. We had sort of a testing, as you pointed out, we had like a test team, and it was discussed within that team how we would organize the data structure of SciNote. With the recent launch of the highest level of data structure, I think that was very helpful to us, because when we first came on board, we were actually looking for exactly that additional level. We just had that first starting level, and it was a little compacted from what we were coming from. We were used to having more levels, and so that additional layer really gave us the ability to be far more flexible. We tend to, internally, we track formal projects with a very formal coding system, and then informal projects just far more informally. And that layer gave us the ability to split them out now. So you can have very formal new product development projects that are tracked within SciNote, as well as far less standardized project folders. And the nice part is that because you can add that coding, a scientific manager that's going to come along and say, I'm here to look at this formal project X and also informal project Y, they can easily navigate to either of those projects without getting lost or confused by which data goes with which project. But that is a great question. I mean, especially to your point, breaking into production teams, analytical teams, you have to keep in mind your internal processes. And I think that's a really great point that you made, Jonas. It's not just what SciNote or another ELN can provide, right? But it's how do you represent your processes within the ELN? And I think that is a critical question to be asking yourself and your team as you move forward evaluating any given ELN.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more, and it's what we see just statistically. People that, because we offer all our new customers a workshop, essentially what Kyle was mentioning with Vid, where they do the mapping of processes, and we see the adoption of companies that do this or don't do this is huge. It's a huge difference, and yeah, this is the critical part, because every ELN is going to come with some level of flexibility, and you're going to need to do some level of mapping, essentially, your processes to the software. All right, so last question from my side, and we'll address then questions from the audience. So. Kyle, you switched from another ELN to SciNote. How painful was this?
It actually wasn't painful at all. Certainly, so getting on board with SciNote was not all that challenging. The things I described in my presentation really speak to the major challenges we faced. It's all around training, and then following implementation, that follow-up and encouragement, getting the stickiness of using the system, so to speak. So really, the coming on board with SciNote was not a great challenge. As an anecdote, the previous provider, we have had some challenges getting our data in the correct format we wanted. So as just a side note, keep that in mind. If you're looking to pull data if you're looking to transition from another ELN, keep in mind that formatting of that data could be vastly different between both ELNs, and there's going to be an interim repository of you, the organization, in the middle. So that can be a little bit of a complex process. It's, you know, if you have solid IT support, it hasn't been overly challenging. It's just taking time, really, is the biggest thing. But in terms of getting on board with SciNote, that really hasn't been challenging at all. Understanding the team's need, doing your initial evaluation that Jonas walked through so nicely, and then ultimately making your decision. That's probably the greater amount of time, you know, deciding who you want to select for an ELN. And then the actual training process, we pushed it along a little quickly. We were getting towards the end of 2020 and wanted to wrap things up. So I think Vid kept sort of saying, are you sure you want to move this quickly? But, you know, that's how we do it in New England. So, but no, it really went quite smoothly, and really no complaints or any sort of technical challenges.